When you think of civil defence during wartime, what comes to mind? Bomb shelters, rationing and air raid sirens. The truth is far darker and, well, far more complex. For decades, governments and media promoted strategies and advice that they claimed would save lives. But history shows us that many of these so-called safety measures were either ineffective or downright dangerous. Millions of civilians placed their trust in myths, only to find themselves trapped, exposed, or worse. Today, we're going to dissect these myths and show you not just how they failed, but what we can learn to apply today. Lessons that are as relevant for preppers and serious history buffs as they were for those who lived through the conflicts themselves. Believing that a flimsy shelter could survive a direct hit was deadly. During World War II, authorities frequently encouraged civilians to build backyard shelters or rely on public air raid shelters as protection against bombs. The public was told that reinforced basements or wooden sheds would shield them from blasts. In reality, shelters often lacked proper reinforcement, ventilation and blast resistance. When bombs fell directly, these structures became death traps, collapsing under debris or filling with smoke. The lesson here is clear. When it comes to protection, assumptions can be fatal. If you were living under wartime conditions, the practical approach would have been to assess the structural integrity of any shelter, prioritize underground areas with solid concrete and proper egress, and maintain multiple escape routes. Today, for preppers, this means evaluating safe rooms, storm shelters, or even reinforced areas in your home based on actual engineering standards rather than wishful thinking or outdated advice. Trusting government-issued instructions without scrutiny put people at risk. Another lethal myth was blind adherence to civil defence pamphlets. Authorities often issued instructions on blackout procedures, evacuation routes, and emergency protocols that sounded logical, but ignored real-world variables. For example, in several European cities during air raids, citizens were instructed to stay in place during certain alerts. However, the directions didn't account for bombing patterns, firestorms, or delayed evacuations. People who followed the rules meticulously sometimes found themselves in the wrong place at the wrong time. The takeaway here is discernment. Civil defence is not about blind obedience, it's about observation and adaptability. A practical example: if an alert system or evacuation plan is outdated or poorly mapped, you must understand the terrain, local threats and contingencies. History teaches us that situational awareness can save lives, even when official instructions fail. Assuming all chemical or nuclear threats could be countered with simple masks was fatal. During the height of Cold War fears, millions were told that gas masks and stockpiled pills could fully protect them from chemical or nuclear attacks. The reality was far grimmer. Masks often didn't fit properly, filters were outdated, and the psychological strain of sheltering under the threat of contamination led to panic, poor decision-making, and sometimes exposure. Applying this knowledge today means understanding that survival tools are only effective if properly maintained and fully understood. For a prepper historian, this translates into hands-on training with protective gear, rotation of supplies to avoid exploration, and drills that account for human error. History shows that relying solely on tools without knowledge is a recipe for disaster. Perhaps the most overlooked myth was the belief that civilians would remain calm, orderly and rational during emergencies. In truth, panic, stampedes and mob behaviour were, actually quite common. During the London Blitz, entire crowds rushed into shelters, sometimes crushing those inside or blocking exits altogether. Civil defence manuals rarely address this reality, just assuming everyone would behave like trained soldiers rather than, terrified civilians. The lesson for modern enthusiasts is really the importance of planning for human behaviour, not just technical safety. If you were a civilian during wartime, organising family members, creating clear exit strategies and practising emergency drills could honestly mean the difference between life and death. For preppers, understanding crowd dynamics, communication and decision-making under stress is, I'd say, just as vital as having supplies. Overestimating the protective power of rationing and stockpiling often had, unfortunately, tragic consequences. Governments promoted the idea that following rationing schedules or storing certain staples would guarantee survival. While rationing did help extend resources, many civilians underestimated how quickly shortages or supply disruptions could actually occur. Some hoarded improperly, stored perishable items incorrectly, or relied on inadequate knowledge of nutrition, which sadly contributed to illness and weakened the population. Practical application today is, pretty straightforward. Proper stockpiling requires knowledge, rotation, and honestly, some realistic planning. You need to learn how long foods actually last, store them in appropriate conditions, and, diversify your supplies. History proves that preparation without understanding is really just preparation without protection. Learning from history is, without a doubt, your most effective survival tool. The stories of civilians who died following civil defence myths are frankly sobering, but they also provide a blueprint for smarter preparation. The key is questioning conventional wisdom, verifying instructions, understanding human behaviour, and of course maintaining practical hands-on knowledge. In every era, myths persisted because they were easier to communicate and easier for authorities to manage. But sadly, the cost was often human lives. For anyone interested in history or survival, applying these lessons today is not just theoretical. It's about creating realistic plans, maintaining equipment, understanding the limits of protection, and, crucially, training yourself to respond logically under pressure. Civil defence myths didn't just fail, they actively misled people, and understanding why ensures we don't repeat the same mistakes. If you found this exploration of civil defence myths that got civilians killed valuable, take a moment, if you will, to hit subscribe and share it with fellow history enthusiasts. Every myth we uncover together sharpens our understanding and keeps these lessons alive. The past has hard-won wisdom for those willing to learn. Don't just watch history, study it, question it, and apply it.